Hello, everybody. No one's here yet. As you come, I'm excited to talk with you. Oh, Lizzie. Oh, great. Cool. Oh, okay. There are a bunch of participants. I'm just not seeing you pop up on my screen. I really enjoy doing these presentations, and I really appreciate seeing y'all's comments. So thanks for saying hey as you pop in. That's really helpful. And I'm going to get started here in just a minute. And if anyone has, as we're waiting for people to join, if anyone has a question or two that you want to ask me while we're waiting for people to start, I'm happy to answer a question or two. Oh, somebody is here, Lizzie, who came to one of our women's carpentry classes. That's awesome. It's nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so it seems like we have a bunch of people here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. Oh, there's one more, or there's a couple questions. Do we certify our homes? We do not certify our homes. We are primarily an educational organization. So we teach people how to build tiny houses, and we also teach classes on all sorts of different subjects. We teach a women's basic carpentry class. We run 13 of those a year. So that's a really big deal for us. And then we have our Tiny House Academy, which is online, and then our in-person classes. We have an online gardening school and all this other stuff. And so we do build 3 tiny houses each year, and then another teacher that we work with builds another 3. So we have 3 tiny house in-person classes each year. And so 6 tiny house shells get built during those classes. And so those we just sell to community members, basically for the price of materials. We're not in the business of making money building the tiny houses. And so that's not something that we do. And do I work with any other school and or students? I have in the past worked with a lot of schools, and Wild Abundance has grown so much that at this point I'm kind of steering the ship. And so my focus is there rather than doing much guest teaching or even doing a ton of teaching with Wild Abundance. It's more like training teachers and yeah, just designing programs and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you all. And I have created a presentation to share with you about the steps of building a tiny house. And I'm going to be pulling that up. And yeah, it's interesting because I don't work with Zoom that much, believe it or not. I more work with other programs, so it might take me just a minute. It's saying that I have this presentation open and you can see it, but it's going to take me just a minute to pull it up. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. And here we go. Okay, so if you all can communicate with me, giving me some comments just to let me know if you can see my presentation, that would be super helpful. Okay, I'm just going to trust that everything's working, and if it's not, let me know. So what'd you say?
Hey, yeah, actually, we can't see it for some reason. It says you have started sharing your screen sharing, but we can't see the presentation like I was able to just a second ago. Maybe try it again.
We tested it. Okay, well, I will.
We try, yeah, try it again.
I'll try again. Thank you for making that clear. Let's see here. Okay, so I have this, and I'm going to do this, and then that is here. Okay, cool. So I have this open, and then I am going to share screen. It's going to be this one. Share. Okay, are you all seeing my screen?
Yep, I can see it on my end now.
Okay, wonderful. Cool. So, oh, but this, oh God. Man, everything was going so well, and now it is a little funky. Okay, here we go. This one. Oh no, we need this one from Sarah. Sarah revised. Okay. Luckily, Sarah, who is our art director, she just refined my presentation. So it's a little better. Can everybody see it now? Good to go? Any
Yep,
problems?
good to
Okay,
go.
great. Awesome. So I have been part of building dozens of tiny houses at this point, and I'm really excited to talk about the steps of building a tiny house. So, like we hear a lot about different pieces of building a tiny house, but I think it's really important to get an idea of the big picture. Like, what does it take? What are the steps of building it? So that's what this presentation is about. And this is a picture of our friend Mason with his beautiful tiny house. So steps of building your very own tiny house with Natalie Bogwalker, and I'm an instructor from the online Tiny House Academy with Wild Abundance. So anybody can build a tiny house. These are 4 women that were in one of our in-person tiny house classes, and they're inside a house that they were building. So beginning at the beginning, the first step is design. So it's like you can just have an idea in your head and go ahead and try building that thing, but it really will be way more expensive and way more challenging if you don't have a really solid design. So with tiny house design, you can do lots of different things. If you are wanting to have a mobile tiny houses, in my opinion, are kind of a pain in the butt because they're so narrow, and that's really limiting as far as how you can live within it. There's a lot of creative ways of getting around it, but if you can go wider than 8.5 feet, that is really awesome. And you can do trailers that are 10 feet wide. You can do, and you can do for a lot less money, a house on skids, which is like just basically these big wooden or steel like runners that go under the building. And so that's kind of a big design question that you want to ask yourself before you move on. But whatever the case is, design is really important. And if you can start with a footprint, the way that I like to design, and how I actually just gave a class for our apprentices about that, is starting with the floor plan, like looking at it from like a bird's eye view and what's going to go where within your tiny footprint. And then you design the walls and the windows and all of that based on that floor plan. And if you're going to go with 2 stories, which sometimes makes a lot of sense because the roof and the foundation are the most expensive parts of building a tiny house, then you know that going into it. And when I was designing my log cabin, which is this building that we are in, I designed it first with just 1 story with a loft. And in the design process, I realized that I couldn't fit in everything that I needed, all the elements that I wanted. So I decided to make it 2 full stories. So I'm spending a little bit of time talking about design because it is such an essential part of the process. And then there's site work. The site work might just be done with hand tools or you might have blessedly flat ground. It's really important if you are doing a tiny house with a permanent foundation that you create positive drainage, which means making it so that the water flows away from the house. If you're building a house that's on skids or on wheels, the site work is less important, but it's still important to have a clear space to be able to move completely around the house. Foundations. So again, if you're building a tiny house on wheels or a tiny house on skids, the foundation, that is your foundation. But if you are building a tiny house that is a permanent tiny house, which if you can, it's really a lot less expensive, like for what you get and lasts a lot longer than a mobile tiny house. And you can have like big roof overhangs that help protect your house and all of these things. So doing a permanent foundation can be really, really awesome if you are in that situation. But if you don't own the land that you're putting the tiny house on, or if you're wanting to be mobile, then of course, wheels or skids make a lot more sense. After building the foundation, or if you are doing your tiny house on wheels, then doing your floor system and your subfloor is the next step. So this is a picture from one of our in-person tiny house classes. And what they're doing is they're putting these joist hangers onto the band. So yeah, creating your floor system and your subfloor is the next step. Then comes wall framing. So typically, walls are built, this is a stick framed house that we are looking at, that a wall is being erected for. And what stick frame means is basically you're using small pieces of lumber, typically 2x4s or 2x6s, sometimes 2x8s, to build a wall. And typically you build that wall on the floor and then you raise that wall up. Sometimes you put sheathing, which is a material to help create rigidity in the wall, and also to just be another layer of protection from the elements. And so, because siding goes on top of the sheathing. And so often the sheathing will be put on before the wall is raised. In this case, we were using rough sawn lumber, and the rough sawn lumber is local and therefore a lot more ecologically sound, and it's very heavy. And so we did not add the sheathing to the walls before we erected them. We just did diagonal bracing. You can see on the back wall, there's like a 2x4 that's going across at a diagonal. And so the sheathing helps the walls to not rack, and the bracing does the same thing. And then after you do your wall framing, and the sheathing should be done on top of your walls. And then after you do that, then rafters and rafter blocking. So rafters, you can see, are these like boards, essentially, that span the length of your roof. And so you might have a shed roof, which is just like one roof plane. You might have a gable roof, which is like this. You might have a clerestory, which is like this. But any of those will use rafters. If you're doing a gable roof, though, you can use less materials by doing trusses. And trusses are this way of using smaller materials to create a really strong shape by using the magic of triangles. My dad was an engineer and he would always talk about the magic of triangles. And so you can do trusses if you're doing a gabled roof and you're not using the attic space, but otherwise you'll be using rafters. And if you're using rafters, then you want to put blocking in between the rafters to hold them up and hold them rigid, and also keep creatures from trying to crawl into your house. Then comes purlins or roof sheathing. So roof sheathing is when you have continuous sheathing that covers the roof. So in this case, we were using zip system sheathing, which is this special type of OSB, which is like basically all these wood chips that are glued together. And then there's like a fabric layer and then a layer of paint over it. And that makes it so that if you tape in between those seams, you don't have to use house wrap or tar paper on the roof. It's kind of a gimmick, but it's kind of awesome. And so anyway, you can also do purlins, which purlins are what people use, especially to build barns, and were more used traditionally when we didn't have sheet goods like zip system or like plywood. And so those purlins would be typically 1x4s that are going opposite the way of the rafters. And that's what you attach the roofing material to. And so roof sheathing is like a complete covering of the roof, whereas purlins are not covering the whole roof, but basically making nailers or something to attach, especially roofing metal to. And then comes putting on the roofing. And I typically use roofing metal. This is standing seam, which is an amazing material. It is a lifetime roof. All of the fasteners are hidden, whereas typical metal roofs, there's like fasteners that are exposed and they have rubber washers, but those rubber washers wear out. And then you essentially have lots of holes in your roof. And so using the standing seam, which if you drive up the eastern seaboard, especially in the mid-Atlantic, you see a lot of standing seam, and it's an awesome roof, but it's expensive. And then, and shingles, there's lots of different roof options, and what roof option you use will largely be dependent upon the slope of your roof. So if you have a steeper roof, you can use more different types of roofing options, especially like shingles, because it will still shed. Whereas if you have a flatter roof, you can't do a shingled roof because then the water can get back underneath. And standing seam roofing, depending on the type of standing seam, you can use with a much lower pitch roof than other types of roofing metal. There's also EPDM roofs, and we have lots of material on all of the different options for roofs in the Tiny House Academy. And I have just a half an hour, so I'm going to just breeze through this and just focus on big steps, even though I really want to go into the details. And then window and door installation is the next step. And yeah, it's really possible for you to do these things in other orders, and it just makes it way more expensive and not as effective. So I really encourage that you all take notes. And I think that you can also contact Wild Abundance if you want to have a list of these steps written out. And then you have options. So what we just went through was all of the things that you have to do first, and then you can choose to move into the interior or be working on the exterior of your building. And, it's better to finish your exterior first, but a lot of people who are wanting to move into their tiny houses quickly because they're paying rent or whatever, go ahead and just, go ahead and work on their interior first so that they can move in, and then finish their exterior while they are inside their house. And while that is not the best thing to do, that's often what owner builders of tiny houses end up doing. So the first step is ductwork. Most tiny houses at this point don't have any ductwork, but I have this in this presentation because I want this presentation to be able to be appropriate for people who are building not so tiny houses, and ductwork might be a thing. In my little cabin, I have a wood cook stove, and in my additions, because now it's not such a tiny house, I have another wood stove over there. And I also recently installed a mini split unit, which is like a little heat pump. And it works for heat, and it works for air conditioning and dehumidification, which in the Southeast is a really big deal. And that's why I installed it. So I have no ductwork, which is great. Plumbing. So plumbing has to be done in the walls before you cover up the walls with insulation and with drywall. So this is done when you have sheathing, but before you do, you don't have to wait till and typically it's not done once you have siding. So plumbing, and then electrical, and that also is hidden in the walls. So you need to do it before you put wall paneling up. And then after you have the electrical and plumbing in the walls and in whatever ceiling systems you might have and floor systems, then installing insulation. And there's lots of different options for insulation. There's hemp insulation, there's wool insulation, there's blown in insulation, there's lots of options. And again, I don't have time to go into them here, but if you want more, check out the Tiny House Academy. Then ceiling paneling, and then drywall or wall paneling. So we're kind of working from the top down. And then paint. So in this case, these two ladies who are former apprentices of mine are doing earthen paint, which is a really cool painting technique. Again, no time for it now. And then flooring. So it's really great in this picture. They didn't do the drywall first, but it's because we were teaching a class and we wanted everyone to get to learn how to do flooring. And so they did a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't in exactly the order because we wanted them, it was like a cooking show. We wanted them to be able to learn all the steps. So installing flooring, but it's great if you have all your drywall up and your paint before you do your flooring, because then you don't get paint on your floor. Then fixtures. So, they're like light fixtures and plumbing fixtures, like your faucet and stuff like that. And then interior trim. And so Yeah, trim. It's nice if you have the paint done before you put the trim, which covers up the paint, because then you don't have to tape your trim. Oh, there's 2 interior trim pictures. That is a very fuzzy picture, but you can see I'm finishing a nest right before I gave birth to my daughter. So it's very fun picture. And then the exterior. So soffit and fascia. And that is basically like finishing off your rafter ends or the ends of your trusses so that critters don't get in there, and creating venting in that soffit or creating venting in your soffit, which is the under part. The fascia is the face. That's how I always remember it. And so that there can be ventilation in your roof so you don't have mold. Then siding and exterior trim. And of course, all these exterior things can happen before, and it's better to do them before you do your interior. But really, if you finish your interior, you can move in and then finish the exterior later, which is appealing. Gutters, super important, especially if you have a tiny house on a foundation and you don't want to get water into your foundation. You want to get the water away from your house. And then finally is landscaping. It's really like when you're building a tiny house, whether you're building a mobile tiny house or a tiny house on a foundation, you're going to create a lot of disruption just by, like, even if you're not using heavy machinery to do site work, like you are going to be just like walking around a lot, and that is going to cause a lot of disruption. And so best to wait to do your landscaping until you've finished with the disruption. And yeah. Yeah, so this is my log cabin, which has now become not so tiny of a house, and it looks bigger than it is. It's 12 by 16 is the footprint of the original cabin, and then I've added on a couple of additions as I had a daughter and wanted things like a bathtub. And then the building that is below that, the first floor is all utilities, and then the second floor has been used for lots of different things, but right now it is an apartment for my friend and her son, who's my daughter's best friend, which is really amazing to have them right there. So that is what I have for my presentation, and I really wanted to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see what you all are writing. And so if anyone has any questions, now is the time to write them in. So make sure to have your structure engineered. Need to make sure to have your structure engineered. I mean, you know, if you're doing a really crazy structure, I think that it can be important to have it engineered, but you can also, like, you don't have to get your blueprints stamped by an engineer if you're doing a very standard structure. Like, if you're building to code, you don't need to have it engineered. You have to submit your plans to someone who looks at them. And you can also, like, if you're building a pretty conventional stick frame structure, you can use span tables and you can do a lot of your own engineering. It's always good if you are working by yourself to, you know, talk to a builder friend or have someone look at your plans and make sure they're good. If you're not getting your place inspected, make sure everything is structurally sound. But yeah, we have had like bigger timber frames engineered, but I've never done that. The cost of our apprenticeship program, so we have a couple different apprenticeship programs right now. Our apprenticeship program right now is non-residential. It's 2 days a week and it's 4 months. And so that's for our building apprenticeship. We also have a permaculture and gardening apprenticeship, and that is 1 day a week for 9 months. And yeah, so I think that they are sliding scale. Maybe Sarah, you can type that into the chat because I can't remember, but I think it's like 1,800 to 4,000 sliding scale. We really believe in a sliding scale, and Sarah's looking up the price of that. And Sarah's also highlighting something that I really want to extend, and that is that we are offering a 20% discount on the Tiny House Academy right now. We've opened it up just for you all to register. And so if you all want to sign up for our Tiny House Academy, which is this incredibly useful online library with literally hundreds of videos that go through every step that you need to build a tiny house, you can check it out at wildabundance.net, and you just click building classes, and then online tiny house academy is under online classes. And she actually put the link in the chat, and the code for that is tiny20, all capitals, and that's for the 20% off. And then, do I have access to a mill for a lot of my lumber? So I have a friend who was an arborist, and he really wanted a sawmill, and so several of us went in and purchased him a sawmill, and then he has been doing milling for me ever since. And for a while that was discounted because of the help with the sawmill, but at this point I just pay him to do it. But I have a lot going on, so learning how to operate the sawmill myself was not a priority, but working with someone with a portable sawmill was awesome, because we have a lot of trees on the property, and some of them need to go for various reasons. Like, we like to release the nut bearing species, and I have a whole lecture on it, Tiny House Academy, if anyone wants to check it out. And it looks like Zach is saying, Sarah, could you drop the link in here? So maybe you could drop the link one more time, Sarah. That would be awesome. And great. Can you design a floor plan with a gooseneck? Yes, I have. And building, so when I was talking about wall raising, designing walls on trailers is more challenging because there's all these shapes to work with. So the gooseneck is one of those shapes, and a gooseneck trailer is one that has this extra little space that can fit on top of the bed of the truck that's hauling it. And we have built one tiny house on a gooseneck trailer. So you have to account for that when you're doing your floor plan, and be thinking about stairs and how you're going to access that space. But it's really a great bonus space that makes a lot of sense, especially as a bedroom. Also, when designing walls on trailers, the wheel wells, like, it just makes more sense to build the wall in place if you're building on a trailer. And then other questions. Love the step by step. Awesome. Average cost for a DIY tiny home, man, that is a huge range. And I would say anywhere from $6,000 to 160 grand. And it just so much depends on the choices that you make. Like, trailers are going to be a big investment. Like, depending on what trailer you get, you can easily spend between $10,000 and $20,000 on a trailer. It's possible to go less than that, but for a really good quality trailer, that is common, especially these days. For the wall framing and sheathing, like, we're doing these shells that are 12 by 24 on skids, and the shells are about $4,500 of materials. But then all of your fixtures, and that's a big space, so that's going to be kind of more materials for the shell than you might otherwise have. But yeah, it's just incredibly variable. Like, you can choose a light fixture that is like $15, or you can choose a light fixture that is like really baller and really nice, and it might cost you $300. And that's kind of, the situation for everything. Like, you can use paneling for the outside of your house that is very, very simple and very inexpensive, or you could get cypress paneling that is beautiful and rot resistant and all of these things, but it's going to be way more expensive. So yeah, with everything with tiny houses, it's a big range. And Sarah, I think we're offering the How to Save Money Building a Tiny House, that free class too, that folks can sign up for. So if you could put the link also in the chat for that, that would be great, because we get a lot of questions about that, and it's super helpful. So yeah, thank you so much for this. And I think I'm about to get cut off. And I hope that you can check out some of our free offerings, and or sign up with this 20% discount, or maybe come to some of our classes. I'd love to see you here. And thank you so much for putting on this summit. This event is really awesome. And I'm stoked that you all just care about tiny houses, because it's something I'm so passionate about. And have a wonderful rest of your day.